Jake Carter could not recall a single morning of his adult life when he had not awakened to the sight of his beloved automobile, that fiery red 1969 Camaro he affectionately called Rosie. Each day, the sun's beams would spill through the thin curtains of his modest, one-bedroom apartment, illuminating the chrome plating, the racing stripes, and the well-polished exterior that had claimed his heart before any person or ambition had managed to do so. He had no wife, no steady girlfriend, only a parade of fleeting acquaintances and a job that hovered just high enough above boredom to keep him returning. Yet none of that mattered in those first morning moments, for his mind invariably drifted to the next rumble of the engine, the next spin of the tires, the next proud parade in some parking lot where he could show the world what a real muscle car looked like. On a particular Tuesday that felt like every other Tuesday in the unremarkable suburban sprawl of Glendale Falls, Jake set off to the grocery store with a sense of routine so deeply ingrained, one would think he could navigate with his eyes closed. He was no stranger to the inviting space behind the wheel, the warm hum of Rosie's engine, and the startled expressions of passers-by when that engine roared to life. His days at work felt like a footnote in his life, a short pause in his true calling of meticulously cleaning the Camaro's interior or waxing its exterior until the reflection was as crisp as a mirror. That day, as Rosie glided into the grocery store's parking lot, Jake took a moment to regard the passers-by. Many recognized him, or rather recognized Rosie, with her shining exterior beneath a bright sun. He returned their curious stares with a small salute, stepping out and feeling the heat radiate up from the asphalt. He had come for a simple reason: bananas, the one fruit he regularly consumed because, after hours in the gym, they offered a quick fix of energy and a semblance of healthiness. Yet, on this fateful day, the produce aisle would introduce him to a phenomenon beyond his wildest imagination. He had no inkling of the cosmic wave about to crash upon his shores, disguised so innocently as a single, perplexed being who was learning how to peel a banana. Jake spotted her before he knew who or what she really was. A woman, slight of build yet somehow regal in posture, stood in front of the bananas, scrutinizing them like they were objects of the greatest fascination in the cosmos. He could not help but notice the faint shimmer in her violet skin, as if tiny luminescent flecks moved beneath its surface. Her eyes shone a strange, deep gold that seemed to shift and glimmer when she tilted her head. And, though Jake's immediate response was to think of contact lenses or some new trend in body paint, there was something quietly surreal about her. Despite her otherworldly beauty, she looked uncertain, glancing from left to right, as if searching for help. She was barefoot. Jake noticed that, too, though she wore an elegant silver and white ensemble that seemed tailor-made to highlight her shimmering complexion. He cleared his throat as politely as he could, uncertain whether or not to ask if she needed assistance. There was a tension in the air, a silent undercurrent that something about her was not of Earth, not from anywhere around Glendale Falls, nor anywhere in the wide country. She spotted him, offering a gentle nod, then returned her attention to the bananas in her hand, attempting to figure out how to peel them. Jake stepped forward, his curiosity blazing. "Here," he said, the moment feeling strangely monumental. "You crack the top like this, then you peel the rest down." He mimed the motion in front of her, showing how to remove the banana peel. She tilted her head, eyes wide, and repeated the process with the delicate precision of someone performing an unfamiliar ritual. Then she took a small, experimental bite. Her face lit up with apparent delight, and she clasped the banana like it was a treasured relic. Jake expected a short laugh, or maybe a thanks, but what she said next froze him in place. "I must request your aid. It is urgent, and there is no time to explain the full measure of things here." Her voice was soft, each syllable dipped in a mild accent that did not align with any place on Earth. "In my land, or rather, on my world, you have just offered me a symbolic fruit. As I interpret your intentions, you have declared yourself my protector." Jake's heart hammered. The banana in her hand felt as if it had become the centerpiece of a cosmic misunderstanding. He managed to stammer, "Protector? I mean, that was just a banana. People eat them, that's all." She narrowed her golden eyes, her expression a curious blend of amusement and gravity. "Nevertheless, Jake Carter," she said, and Jake nearly jumped at hearing his name slip from her lips so casually. "The gesture is done. Your planet's customs, from my studies, have shown that offering food can signify hospitality. Where I come from, to accept food from a stranger is an invitation into deeper trust. It may have a slightly different meaning to you, but to me, it is a vow. I will trust your intentions, and if you are willing, you shall help me in my diplomatic mission." Jake stared at her, speechless. The grocery store's neon lighting buzzed faintly overhead, an absurdly mundane soundtrack to this cosmic conversation. He soon realized they were drawing the attention of onlookers, so he gestured for her to follow him to a quieter corner near the cereal aisle. Before he could gather his wits enough to ask the million questions swirling in his head, the woman placed a slender hand, with elongated fingers, gently on his arm. "My name is Zara Vel," she said, speaking in a subdued tone that suggested secrets too grand for this fluorescent corridor. "I hail from the planet Ceres, that you might more generally refer to my origin as the Andromeda Galaxy. I have come as an emissary, a diplomat, to propose certain pacts with Earth's governing bodies. I must speak to your leaders, but I have learned that not all authorities on your planet are trustworthy, and I have many reasons to fear certain clandestine forces that conspire against me." Jake blinked. He had been expecting to walk out of the store with bananas, maybe a couple energy drinks, but now he was grappling with the presence of an alien who considered him her sworn protector. "You're an alien," he said under his breath, then laughed awkwardly. "This is crazy. This is, well, I guess welcome to Earth." She smiled, and Jake detected a seriousness in her gaze that belied the easy grin. "I appreciate your welcome," she said. "Will you help me, Jake Carter?" And in that moment, despite the flurry of confusion and the rational part of his mind screaming to run away, to call the police, or do something that made sense, Jake Carter felt himself nod. "Yes," he said, his voice wavering slightly. I'll help you in whatever way I can." He had no idea that this impulsive vow would catapult him into a kaleidoscope of interstellar politics, secret government agencies, and a chain of events that would push him to the very edges of bravery. They made their exit in a nervous hush, Zara cradling the bunch of bananas. Jake fumbled for his car keys, leading her through the automated doors and out into the wide parking lot. He waved away a panhandler who, upon seeing Zara's exotic features, merely stared in astonishment until Jake quietly mumbled that they were in a hurry. When Jake unlocked the Camaro, Zara let out a curious hum, touching the smooth exterior with the same reverence she had offered the bananas. "Is this your vehicle?" she asked. "I studied these in preparation for my journey, but yours is older, yes?" Jake couldn't help the surge of pride that swelled in his chest. "It's a 1969 Chevy Camaro," he said. "Collectors call it a classic muscle car." "It's my baby." Zara nodded, her golden eyes tracing the curves of the metal. "We have such transport on Ceres, but they are fueled differently, and the designs are, well, let us say more streamlined." She smiled, then opened the passenger door with cautious curiosity. She slid into the leather seat, and Jake gently shut the door behind her. He circled to the driver's side, started the engine, and listened as Rosie roared to life with that throaty rumble. A grin flickered across his face despite the surreal circumstances. This was his territory, and for a moment, he felt an odd sense of comfort in being behind the wheel. But his comfort was short-lived. A dark SUV had rolled into the parking lot, its tinted windows betraying no sign of who rode within. Jake scarcely noticed it until Zara tensed, and her voice grew urgent. "Drive," she said, not quite shouting. "We must leave now." Without waiting for an explanation, Jake slammed his foot on the accelerator, forcing Rosie to lurch forward. The Camaro roared across the asphalt, weaving between parked cars. The dark SUV peeled after them, tires screeching. Jake's pulse thundered in his ears, and his mind spun, trying to reckon with how quickly this morning had devolved from a mundane shopping trip into a high-octane chase. Zara's voice remained calm. "They are agents, possibly from the country's secret service, or another faction. I sensed them tracking me from the moment I arrived. We have to lose them." Jake's jaws clenched. Rosie was formidable, but Glendale Falls was not exactly a place of wide-open roads. "Hang on," he muttered, spinning the wheel to take a sharp turn onto Main Street. Cars honked, and pedestrians hurried out of the way as Jake sped down the thoroughfare, the SUV tailing them with grim determination. He glimpsed the face of the pursuing driver in the side mirror. It was a blur, but what he caught was enough. A stern visage, brows furrowed, eyes locked onto them like a predator fixating on prey. Jake felt goosebumps rise on the back of his neck. This was real. This was dangerously real. His mind raced. Should he go to the police station? That might only complicate matters if these pursuers were indeed tied to some government agency. And if they were unscrupulous enough, they could easily orchestrate a cover-up. But where else to go? "Take the next left," Zara instructed. "It leads to a highway, yes? We must get distance." Jake nodded, weaving through a gap in traffic, ignoring the shrill sound of horns. He reached an intersection, noticing the light was turning red, but gunned it. Rosie screamed as she shot forward, crossing seconds before the opposing light turned green. The SUV got caught behind the sudden surge of cross-traffic. Jake sighed with relief, though he suspected they wouldn't remain stuck for long. Zara closed her eyes, pressing one hand to the dashboard. "I regret dragging you into this," she murmured, though Jake caught a faint note of resolve in her voice. "But I sense your loyalty." "Thank you." Jake swallowed hard, turning onto the main highway. It's okay," he managed. "I gave you the banana, didn't I?" That odd statement might have been comedic in another context, but now it merely underscored the strangeness of the situation. Zara offered him a gentle, thoughtful smile. In that moment, Jake felt a curious spark of responsibility, and despite the chase, despite the roiling fear, a piece of him felt proud. They did not stop until well into the next county, the afternoon sun sinking in the sky, painting the horizon in hues of orange and gold. A small motel sat off the side of a deserted road, the kind of place Jake normally would never consider, but it offered the anonymity they needed. He pulled Rosie around the back, wanting to avoid direct view from the highway. After a quick transaction in the lobby, a single room, paid in cash, Jake and Zara slipped inside. The room smelled faintly of stale cigarettes and cleaning product, but it was hidden enough, and that was all that mattered. Jake locked the door, drew the curtains, and let out a trembling breath. It was only then that the adrenaline began to subside, and the reality of the day's events bore down on him like a lead weight. He slumped onto one of the two queen beds, burying his face in his hands. Zara, still cradling the bananas, sat on the edge of the other bed. She studied Jake with a mixture of sympathy and determination. "I owe you an explanation," she said softly. "Everything is happening more quickly than I anticipated. I must share with you the nature of my mission and also the danger we face." Jake looked up, eyes bloodshot with stress and exhaustion. "You do? Because I'm still trying to figure out how you know my name, and how you speak English so well, and why I'm being chased like some fugitive." Zara leaned forward, lacing her elongated fingers together. "We have been monitoring Earth for some time. I am not the first visitor. There have been many, though we keep a low profile, preferring not to incite panic. I have studied your cultures, your languages, your technology. I learned your name because your presence in that grocery store was foreseen by my guides." She paused, her gaze drifting momentarily to the dingy walls of the motel, as though the memory of her reason for coming weighed on her. "In short, my role as a diplomat is to negotiate the first official treaty between our worlds. We wish to offer Earth certain gifts of technology in exchange for something intangible, your acceptance, your cooperation. We come not as conquerors, but as potential allies, watchers from a distant galaxy who have seen Earth's potential and also the seeds of its self-destruction." Jake exhaled. "So you're telling me you're here to try and give Earth advanced knowledge, maybe help solve some of our biggest problems?" She offered a small nod. "Yes, but there are factions upon your planet who see such gifts as threats. They worry about losing power, losing control. Some within your governments believe they can harness our technology for war. Others fear that revealing our presence would destabilize economies. And so, there are those who want to capture me, or silence me, to keep Earth from forging a partnership with Ceres." Jake's mind spun with the scope of it all. "Okay," he said. "So the guys chasing us, they want to stop you from meeting Earth's real leaders?" "Yes," Zara said simply. "Though not only them. There are likely multiple groups at play, some wanting me imprisoned, some wanting me destroyed. Yet, ironically, there are also some who genuinely wish to hear me out. I must find them, but with each passing moment, I fear the window of opportunity narrows. My guardians from Ceres are not here. Our code of non-interference means I must do this largely on my own, or else risk inciting conflict." Jake rubbed his temples. He remembered the vow. He had given her a banana, and she had recognized him as her protector. It sounded ridiculous, but as he stared into her earnest, golden eyes, he felt that strange spark again. "Then I guess that means we should try to find the right people, the ones who might actually, want to talk?" Zara managed a small, hopeful smile. "Precisely, Jake Carter. And I believe we must do so in haste." They devised a plan, or at least the beginnings of one, that night in the little motel room. By the time their whispered discussion concluded, the sky outside had gone dark. Jake found himself exhausted, but also oddly exhilarated. He lay on his back, staring at the textured ceiling, while Zara dozed lightly on the other bed. He thought about how his life had changed in less than a day. No more was it a simple routine of work, gym, occasional flings, and revving the engine of his classic car. Now he was caretaker, or caretaker in training, for an alien diplomat whose mission could alter the fate of Earth. A part of him wanted to back out, to disclaim all involvement and return to his old life. But something deeper, some sense of moral duty, burned in him. Besides, he had sworn to protect her, however informally. If he abandoned her now, who knew what might happen? He recalled Zara's explanation of the cosmic significance of giving someone a piece of fruit. It was a gesture pregnant with meaning in her culture, a sign of forging an unbreakable bond. It was, in a way, akin to the old Earth custom of a knight pledging fealty to a queen after accepting a token. That thought made Jake grin drowsily. He, a knight in shining armor, by way of Glendale Falls, sworn to protect a violet-skinned alien princess, or diplomat, or whatever. Weariness finally conquered him, and he drifted into a dream of roaring starships and men in black suits. Morning arrived with a surprisingly gentle quiet. Jake woke to find Zara already up, perched by the room's only window, the drab curtains pulled just enough to let sunlight in. She was munching on a banana, that same look of delightful curiosity lighting her features each time she took a bite. He sat up, yawning. "Good morning," he said, his voice still groggy. Zara replied with a nod. "Your Earth foods are intriguing," she observed. "I sampled the bread, too, though it is quite bland compared to what I know. The banana, however, is pleasing." Jake managed a small laugh. "Glad to hear it." He rubbed the sleep from his eyes. "So, we need to decide our next step. Any guesses where we might find the people who'd be open to your message?" She regarded him, face reflecting her seriousness. "We must reach out to certain figures within the United Nations. I know that's an international collective. They are more likely to view an interstellar treaty through a diplomatic lens rather than a nationalistic one. But they are not immune to infiltration or pressure. Alternatively, we could attempt to speak with the scientific community, as some among them are prepared for contact with extraterrestrial intelligence." Jake thought for a moment. "Either path we choose, we'll need to be careful. The people chasing us aren't going to just give up. And I'm guessing you can't exactly call the White House or the UN and say, 'Hey, I'm a friendly alien. Want to meet?'" Zara's eyes sparkled with amusement. "That would not be prudent, I imagine." He sighed, glancing at the rumpled duvet beneath him. "Maybe we should start with a smaller approach. I have a friend, actually, my old college buddy, Manny Rodriguez. He works as a journalist in a bigger city about 100 miles from here. He's always going on about how he wants a scoop that'll blow everything wide open. If we can convince him that you're the real deal, maybe he can connect us to some of his higher-level sources. He's got contacts in national media, maybe even government. It's a stretch, but it might be safer than rolling up to the CIA's front door." Zara nodded slowly, as though processing a strategic plan. "That could work. We must remain vigilant. Your friend must be trustworthy, for once this story is out, it will no longer belong to us. The forces that wish to silence me might intensify their efforts." Jake stood, noticing how stiff his muscles were from the previous day's tension. "Manny's a good guy, and he'll be discreet if I ask him. Plus, I owe him. A while back, I rescued him from a bar fight. Long story, so maybe he'll reciprocate." He paused. "One question, though. What if Manny freaks out when I show up with an alien? He might not handle it well." Zara tilted her head in that graceful, alien way. "We must trust in his open-mindedness. Perhaps you can prepare him in advance." Jake cracked his knuckles, feeling the swirl of nerves in his gut. "Yeah, I'll give him a call. Let's hope he picks up." After a hurried shower and a quick rummage through the meager breakfast selection in the motel lobby, stale cereal and watery orange juice, Jake settled back into the room. Zara perched silently on the bed, her presence somehow making the cheap furniture appear dignified. Jake punched in Manny's number on his phone. It rang several times before a gruff voice answered. Rodriguez speaking. "Manny, it's Jake," he said, forcing a note of calm into his voice. "I need a favor." "Like a big one." The journalist snorted. "I owe you some, Carter." "What's up? Did your car break down? Need a ride? Or do you just want me to confirm a wild rumor about the local baseball team?" Jake cleared his throat. No, it's bigger than that. Manny, I'm going to tell you something that sounds insane. But I need you to hear me out. And I need absolute discretion. A pause. You're scaring me, man, Manny replied, his tone suddenly sober. All right, I'm listening. Jake mustered his courage. I've come into contact with a visitor. She's not from Earth. Manny, I'm talking about a real, living alien. He braced himself for laughter, but Manny remained silent, presumably waiting for a punchline. When none came, Manny finally said, "This better not be a joke, Carter." Jake inhaled sharply. "It's not. She's here with me, and she's in danger. She's a diplomat from another world, and there are people trying to capture her. I need your help, Manny, to get her story out safely. If we can connect with the right people, or get some traction in the media, we might protect her. But if the wrong folks find us first," he trailed off. Manny let out a long breath. "Jake, you sure you're not messing with me? I mean, come on." "I'm absolutely sure," Jake replied, his voice firm. "Look, you know me. I don't get involved in hoaxes. I've never asked you for something like this. Just trust me. I wouldn't call if it wasn't real." A heavy moment passed, and then Manny's tone changed, colored with curiosity and budding excitement. "All right. If you say it's real, I'll hear you out. But we need a secure place to talk. Come to the city. You know the old bookstore near King Street? Meet me out back at midnight. I'll have some gear with me for an interview, but we'll keep it hush-hush." Jake felt a surge of relief. "Thanks, Manny. We'll be there." The drive to Manny's city was tense, but oddly invigorating. The highway stretched before them, bathed in the pale midday light, as Rosie's engine rumbled beneath Jake's feet. Zara sat quietly beside him, occasionally asking questions about Earth's geography or cultures. Jake did his best to explain, though he was hardly a scholar of international affairs. A few times, they both craned their necks to check if they were being followed. Although they spotted a black sedan that lingered behind them for a while, it eventually veered off onto a different exit. Zara closed her eyes momentarily, as though focusing on something intangible. Jake suspected she was scanning for threats in some telepathic or extrasensory manner. She never confirmed such an ability, but the notion that she possessed senses beyond human understanding intrigued him. They arrived in the city by late afternoon, blending into the throng of traffic. Jake sought out a modest hotel, not wanting to repeat the dingy motel experience, yet mindful of the need for discretion. Zara left the room only briefly to accompany him for a quick meal, burgers, fries, and soda, which she sampled with wide-eyed curiosity, before they retreated to wait for midnight. Eventually, the dark sky enveloped the city, and neon lights flickered on. Jake guided Zara through streets that pulsed with urban energy, the roar of buses, the clamor of pedestrians. She was silent, watchful. Her violet skin under the streetlights attracted more than a few astonished stares, but fortunately, many passers-by were too caught up in their own lives to pay close attention. Jake quietly told a curious vendor that she was a performer, heading to some avant-garde show. The vendor merely shrugged. They found the old bookstore, long since closed, its windows plastered with yellowed posters advertising discounted paperbacks. Around the back alley, Manny stood near a dim overhead light, shoulders hunched, hands shoved in the pockets of a worn leather jacket. When he caught sight of Jake, he smiled a little, but that smile froze when his eyes drifted to Zara. Even in the gloom, her otherworldly features were undeniable. Manny's expression shifted from shock to childlike wonder. He stepped forward, hesitant, as though approaching a skittish creature. "My God," he whispered. You weren't joking, Carter." Jake shook his head. "Manny, meet Zara Vel." "Zara, this is Manny Rodriguez, the friend I told you about." Zara bowed her head slightly in greeting. "It is an honor. Jake Carter has spoken well of you." Manny swallowed hard, his gaze darting from Zara's luminous eyes to her violet skin, as though verifying each detail. "Oh, wow. I can't believe it. A real alien, right here." He let out a shuddering breath. "I'm sorry, this is huge." Zara nodded, managing a small smile. "I understand your reaction. This is not a commonplace occurrence. I have chosen to reveal myself because I believe you can help us secure safe passage and an audience with Earth's cooperative authorities." Manny blinked repeatedly. Yeah, of course. I might have a few connections in the capital. Some reporters in DC who might be able to push this story to the right channels. But we have to be careful. If the government, Or these hidden factions find you first, he trailed off, anxiety evident in his furrowed brow. Jake clapped Manny on the shoulder. That's what we're worried about, man. Zara's already had a run-in with some shady suits chasing us. We need your help making contact, or at least making enough noise that they can't just disappear her. Manny nodded, steel creeping into his expression. All right, let's get inside somewhere, maybe do an interview, if Zara's willing, and gather some proof. Then I can start making calls. They ducked through a side door Manny had jimmied open. The interior of the old bookstore smelled of dust and crumbling paper. Manny switched on a small, portable lantern, revealing tall shelves lined with tattered books. He pulled out a digital recorder, a small handheld camera, and laid them on a worn wooden table. I'm going to record this, if that's okay, Manny said, looking to Zara. I won't release it publicly yet, but I need something tangible to show my contacts. Zara pursed her lips, then inclined her head. I agree, though I caution that once recorded, this cannot be undone. If I am captured, such evidence may be used against me, or misconstrued. Manny shot Jake a questioning look. Jake nodded. She's right, Manny. We gotta be careful. Manny swallowed. I'll keep the data locked up. I promise. And so, in the dim glow of that old bookstore, Manny began to interview an alien from another galaxy. He asked about Ceres, about how she arrived, about her mission, about Earth. Zara answered in measured, thoughtful sentences, describing her people's desire for peaceful exploration, their advanced technology, their hope that Earth might join a loose confederation of civilizations that worked toward mutual benefit. She explained that her arrival was a test. If Earth could prove itself mature enough for open contact, more envoys would come. If Earth responded with violence or subterfuge, her people would likely retreat, leaving Earth to its own devices. Manny's eyes shone, equal parts excitement and trepidation. And you trust me with this? Some random journalist who's only known Jake from a rowdy college life. Zara answered softly, I trust Jake Carter's judgment, and he trusts you. That is sufficient. Manny regarded her for a long moment, then turned off the recorder. I'll do it. I'll make the calls. I'll see if I can arrange a discreet meeting, maybe with some open-minded politicians or an ambassador. But we need to be extremely cautious. And we can't let it leak too soon, or the people hunting you will intensify their efforts. A sudden crash outside made them all jump. It sounded like a garbage can being toppled. Jake exchanged a worried glance with Manny, then they scrambled to peek out the dusty front windows. A silhouette flickered under the streetlight, just out of view. Then, the glass behind them exploded. Shards flew in all directions as men in dark tactical gear burst inside, weapons drawn. Jake felt a rush of panic. They'd been followed. The intruders moved with grim efficiency, shining flashlights that danced among the shelves. Manny ducked behind a bookshelf, heart pounding, camera still in hand. Zara inhaled sharply, her golden eyes narrowed in determination. Jake fumbled for anything he could use as a weapon. He grabbed a heavy, brass bookend shaped like a lion's head, brandishing it with adrenaline-fueled desperation. One of the men barked an order. Stand down. We're with the agency. Hand over the asset. Zara's gaze darted to Jake. The men seemed uncertain, scanning the gloom for signs of her violet skin. They had not yet locked onto her position. Manny, pressed against the far wall, clutched the camera to his chest, as if protecting the evidence with his very life. Jake shot Zara a meaningful look, silently telling her to hide. She slipped behind a bookshelf, her slender form moving with uncanny grace. Jake's heart hammered in his chest. If the men took her, if they captured her, all of her hopes, and perhaps Earth's, would be lost. He resolved in that moment to do whatever it took to protect her. The men spread out, flashlights cutting through the dusty gloom. One stepped closer to where Jake crouched, so Jake held his breath. The beam of light passed inches above his head, reflecting off the musty spines of old novels. Once the man had moved on, Jake dared to creep along the floor, inching his way toward a vantage point behind a toppled display. A second crash sounded. Manny, in an attempt at distraction, hurled a stack of books across the room. They scattered with a loud thump, making the intruders pivot, cursing. One shouted, "They're in the corner. Move in." Jake seized the chance. He dashed from his hiding spot toward the next row of shelves, nearly colliding with Zara. She placed a hand on his shoulder, her eyes brimming with quiet courage. She reached into her silver and white robes, producing a small device that glowed with a faint turquoise light. "What is that?" Jake mouthed. "Energy displacement tool," Zara whispered. "I can disrupt their weapons briefly, but it may not last." Jake gave her a curt nod. "We need to get Manny and get out of here." She agreed, and they both steeled themselves. Jake raised the brass bookend in one hand, feeling rather foolish, but determined. In a swift motion, Zara leaned around the edge of a shelf and activated her device. A bright, pulsating field spread through the air, accompanied by a humming resonance that made Jake's teeth buzz. The men yelped as their rifles sparked and fizzled, the electronics jammed by whatever the device emitted. Jake sprang forward, lunging toward the nearest man, using the brass bookend to knock him aside with a desperate blow to the shoulder. The man toppled with a grunt, cursing under his breath. Another tried to wrestle Manny to the ground, but Manny squirmed free, landing a clumsy punch to the man's helmet. For a moment, chaos reigned. The hum of Zara's device, the curses of the disarmed men, the scattered footsteps of Manny and Jake navigating the labyrinth of fallen books. Then one of the men shouted, "Fallback plan. Target the alien." Jake's blood turned to ice. He glimpsed a figure darting toward Zara, brandishing a small sidearm that apparently still functioned. Time slowed to a heartbeat. Jake launched himself into the man's path, ramming his shoulder into the attacker's torso. The sidearm discharged once, the bullet ricocheting off a metal shelf with a horrifying screech. They both tumbled to the floor in a tangle of limbs. The man recovered quickly, elbowing Jake hard in the ribs. Pain exploded through Jake's side, but he managed to grab hold of the sidearm's barrel, preventing the man from taking aim again. Zara rushed forward, eyes blazing, and pressed her glowing device against the attacker's weapon. A brief flash, and the sidearm sputtered. "Let's go," Manny shouted, frantic. He gestured to a narrow door that presumably led out to the street. The black-clad men were reeling, some clawing at their jammed gear. Jake scrambled to his feet, ignoring the sharp pain in his ribcage, and helped Zara do the same. The three of them sprinted toward the back door. An ear-shattering blast rang out. It seemed one of the men's rifles had come back online, at least partially. A spray of bullets ripped through the wooden shelves behind them, sending paper confetti into the air. Jake ducked, certain they would be gunned down at any moment. Somehow, they made it to the door, bursting onto the dark street. They found themselves in another alley, the rancid smell of garbage and stagnant rainwater assaulting their nostrils. Footsteps pounded behind them. Jake's eyes darted wildly, searching for a way out. Then he saw an idling delivery truck at the far end, tailgate open as a man hoisted crates of produce. With no time for delicacy, Jake motioned to Manny and Zara, then bolted across the alley, weaving around trash cans and abandoned pallets. The bewildered driver shouted as Jake, Manny, and Zara hurtled into the truck's cargo space. Manny yanked the rolling door down, plunging them into a cramped darkness that smelled of lettuce and onions. Jake heard the driver's protests, some scuffle outside, but then the truck rumbled to life, lurching forward. "They must have threatened or coerced the driver," Zara whispered, her voice echoing in the stifling cargo bay. Jake shook his head. "Better than staying there with those guys. Let's hope we can jump out when it's safe." And so they fled into the night, hidden among crates of produce in a rickety delivery truck, hearts pounding, the cold realization of how close they had come to capture settling over them. For several tense minutes, the truck bumped and lurched along city streets. Jake strained to listen for any sign of pursuit, but between the rumble of the engine and the rattling crates, it was impossible to glean much. At last, the vehicle ground to a halt. Without a word, Jake cracked the rolling door an inch, peering out. They had stopped in some industrial lot, likely a distribution center. The driver hopped out of the cab, scanning the area nervously. He muttered something into a phone, but soon walked away, leaving the truck momentarily unattended. Jake pushed the door open. Manny and Zara followed, wincing under the harsh fluorescent lights of the depot. They ducked behind some large dumpsters, hearts racing. Overhead, the stars shone faintly, drowned by the orange glow of the city. Manny collapsed against a wall, struggling to steady his breath. "That was insane," he wheezed. "What kind of fools would shoot up a place, not caring who sees?" Zara answered calmly, though her face was tight with tension. "These are no ordinary soldiers. Their employers keep their activities hidden. In your world, power often excuses violence if it is carried out under the banner of national security." Jake placed a hand on Manny's shoulder. "We can't stay in the city. We need a more remote place where we can regroup. Manny, can we get to your apartment? Or is that too obvious?" Manny's expression was grim. "It's definitely on my official records. If these guys are from some agency, they'll have it staked out. But I know a place, an abandoned factory on the outskirts. I sometimes crash there when I need to lay low. Not exactly cozy, but it's off the grid." He glanced down at his camera, cradling it as though it were a precious gem. "I got everything recorded. If we can find a safe place with an internet connection, I might upload it to a secure server. If we can get Zara's story to the right contacts, it might keep her safe. But once it's out there, I can't guarantee how everyone will react. Zara nodded. The truth must emerge, though I fear the consequences. Let us proceed carefully. If we must share this, we do so with caution. Jake, nursing the ache in his ribs, led them in a hurried trek through the shadows of the distribution center. They slipped past a chain-link fence, found a deserted side street, and hailed a passing rideshare using Manny's phone. Manny gave the driver an address a few blocks away from the actual factory, just to keep things vague. 40 minutes later, they emerged near a rusted chain-link fence dotted with barbed wire, the towering skeleton of an old textile mill rising behind it. Cracked windows, battered walls, and graffiti welcomed them, but it was quiet, hidden from the city's main arteries. Manny typed in a code on a battered security keypad by a small side door, a relic from the building's partially modernized era, and ushered them inside. Dust motes swirled in the pale beam of Manny's flashlight. The space was cavernous, the floor covered in debris, old machinery looming in the dark like ancient beasts. Manny led them to a corner area he had converted into a makeshift living space. A threadbare couch, a fold-out table, a portable camping stove, and boxes of supplies. Zara gazed at the industrial gloom, her golden eyes reflecting a kind of muted awe. Your world has many deserted places, she remarked softly. Testaments to progress, or perhaps neglect. Manny gave a rueful chuckle. A little of both. Jake sank onto the battered couch, wincing at the pain in his ribs. Let's rest. We need a plan to get Zara in front of someone who will actually listen. Manny popped open a dented cooler, producing a couple of bottled waters. He handed one to Zara, who sipped it gingerly. Then Manny stared at the camera in his hands. I've got an acquaintance in D.C., he said quietly. Rachel Nguyen, a journalist. She's been dying for a breakthrough story. She has contacts with certain progressive policymakers, folks who might be sympathetic to an alien envoy. If we can get to her, maybe we stand a chance at going legit with this. Zara nodded thoughtfully. That seems wise, though traveling such a distance will be perilous. I wonder if there is a more direct route, perhaps using technology from my starship. She paused, eyes drifting to the dusty floor. My ship is hidden in a remote location, a safe landing area I scouted before arrival. If I can access its systems, we might be able to reach out to certain frequencies that your satellites cannot detect. Jake's eyebrows shot up. You have a ship? Then why didn't you just land somewhere near the White House and say hello? She gave him a patient look. Because that would likely result in immediate military aggression. I chose subtlety, but perhaps returning to my ship is the next step. If it is still undiscovered, it could offer some protection, or at least faster travel. Manny nodded slowly. Where is it? In a forested area about 2 hours from Glendale Falls, Zara replied. We must be certain we are not tracked on our way there. Jake let out a breath. Then that's what we'll do. We'll lay low here for a day or two, figure out how to slip past anyone watching the roads, and get to your ship. A silence fell as all three faced the magnitude of the gamble. Then Zara offered a small smile. I am grateful to you both, she said softly, her voice echoing in the stark emptiness of the factory. Your bravery does you credit. I promise, if we succeed, Ceres will remember your kindness. Jake felt a flush of warmth. Despite the cramped quarters, the dust, and the fear nibbling at the edges of his mind, he felt oddly content. He was doing something that mattered. He was forging a path that could influence the fate of two worlds. And though it was absurd that it all hinged on a banana, he could not deny the sense of destiny in the air. Hiding out in the abandoned factory was both mind-numbing and nerve-wracking. They dared not use their phones for too long, worried that advanced tracking methods might latch onto them. Manny occasionally ventured out for supplies under the cover of darkness, and Jake spent much of the daylight hours pacing among the dusty machinery, pondering the improbable turns his life had taken. Zara, for her part, asked Manny for reading materials, newspapers, books, even old manuals, devouring them with an insatiable thirst for human knowledge. At night, they would gather in Manny's improvised living space, talking in hushed tones. Zara would share details of Ceres, the floating cities powered by harnessed solar winds, the grand halls where species from across Andromeda would meet in solemn assembly, the crystalline lakes that sparkled with bioluminescent life forms. She spoke with fondness, yet also with an undercurrent of sadness, as though she carried the weight of Ceres' expectations on her slender shoulders. Jake found himself leaning forward, rapt, each time she spoke. He could imagine no sight more enchanting than those alien vistas, yet he also felt an irrational pang of pride that Earth might someday stand beside Ceres as an equal. Manny arranged a clandestine phone call with Rachel and Gwen, trusting her not to reveal the conversation's content. She listened in shocked silence, then promised she would do what she could, though the scope of the story was beyond anything she had ever handled. "If you can get me incontrovertible proof," she said, "I will help you reach out to someone high in the political chain who might not be compromised." Manny ended the call feeling hopeful. "She's legit, guys," he assured them. "If we can keep Zara safe until we get to her, we might have a real shot at pulling this off." The departure came on a moonless night, the factory shadows blending seamlessly with the blackness outside. Manny stayed behind, partly to coordinate with Rachel and partly because a large, three-person party on the roads was more likely to draw attention. He would rejoin them once they reached the starship, if all went well. Jake and Zara slipped through the outskirts of the city in a nondescript sedan Manny had borrowed from a friend. Jake felt a twinge of guilt leaving Rosie behind, but the Camaro was too recognizable. For once, it was more important to blend in than to show off. He stroked the steering wheel of the borrowed car, lamenting its blandness, but determined to see things through. Zara navigated using a small handheld device, occasionally pointing to roads or exit signs. Jake noticed that the device displayed strange, twisting symbols, more advanced than anything he had seen, but also aesthetically haunting in its swirling patterns. "These are star maps," she explained. "They can pinpoint my ship's location if it remains active. I left it in a passive mode, but it should still emit a faint signal that only these coordinates can detect." Jake grunted, focusing on the road. His eyes flicked nervously to the rearview mirror. He half expected to see the ominous headlights of an SUV or a black sedan bearing down on them at any moment. But the roads were eerily quiet, and they made it back to Glendale Falls without incident. Zara directed him beyond the town, into the countryside, where rolling fields gave way to thick forests. They eventually parked on a dirt shoulder near a winding trail. The night air was crisp, full of chirping insects and the rustle of leaves. Jake reached into the back seat, retrieving a flashlight and a small bag of supplies. He looked to Zara, who gazed at the forest with purposeful calm. "We must walk from here," she said. "My ship is hidden in a ravine, not far from the main road." They set off under the dark canopy, their flashlight beams cutting through tangled undergrowth. The forest closed around them in a hush of midnight air, broken only by the occasional hoot of an owl or the snap of a branch underfoot. Jake fought the urge to jump at every sound, reminding himself that the greatest dangers likely came from humans. At last, they reached a steep slope leading down into a narrow ravine, dense with ferns and moss. Zara halted, pressing a sequence of commands on her handheld device. Then a faint, shimmering light revealed itself at the base of the ravine. The curved hull of her starship, partially cloaked in a camouflage field that bent the moonlight around it. Jake inhaled sharply. Even half hidden by advanced technology, the ship was a marvel, sleek lines reminiscent of a great aquatic creature, a subtle glow along its edges that pulsed with otherworldly energy. The sight left him momentarily breathless, a ripple of awe coursing through him. Zara smiled at his wonder. "Come," she urged, descending the slope with practiced ease. Jake followed, careful not to lose his footing on the damp ground. When they reached the ship, Zara ran her hand over its surface, which flickered at her touch. A doorway irised open, revealing a softly lit interior. She beckoned Jake to follow her inside, and he hesitated only a moment before ducking through the opening. The air within the ship felt mild and refreshing, as though filtered to perfection. Soft lights glowed along the walls, casting a warm, bluish hue. Panels of alien script flickered, responding to Zara's presence. Jake stood transfixed, turning in circles to take in every sleek console and glowing surface. Zara touched a control panel, and the doors slid shut behind them. "It remains in standby mode," she said, moving gracefully toward a central console. "I can activate partial systems so we can use its sensors to scan for threats. We should remain here only briefly to gather what we need." Jake nodded. His reflection in a polished surface showed a mixture of exhilaration and fatigue. "I never thought I'd set foot inside a spaceship," he murmured. "This is unbelievable." Zara offered him a gentle look. "I am pleased to share it with you. Let us hope it can help secure the alliance I dream of." She began tapping on the console, lines of alien text rippling across a circular display. A distant hum rose in volume, suggesting the ship was coming to life. Lights brightened, revealing an interior of slender corridors that branched off from the central chamber. Jake listened intently as Zara explained that she was booting the ship's stealth systems, ensuring no Earth-based radar could detect them. Then she would attempt a short-range launch, just enough to relocate somewhere safer. Perhaps an isolated mountain clearing where they could wait for Manny and plan the next step. Suddenly, a jarring alarm echoed through the cabin, a shrill, pulsing note that seemed to vibrate the walls. Zara's face paled. "We are being scanned," she said in a tense whisper. "An external sensor is pinpointing our location." Jake's adrenaline spiked. "They found us." She nodded grimly, dancing her fingers over the console. "Yes. The cloak is compromised. They have advanced technology or a direct lead on where to look." Jake glanced around, the alarm ratcheting up his heart rate. "What do we do?" "We must launch now, or risk capture." "I did not want to draw attention with a flight, but we have no choice." Jake swallowed. "Do it. Get us out of here." Zara triggered a sequence, and the hum beneath their feet rose to a crescendo. The floor vibrated. Outside, the camouflage field flickered and collapsed, revealing the ship to any watchers in the forest. Jake buckled into a seat that rose from the floor, trying to steady his breathing. Zara strapped herself in at the pilot's console. Lights on the console flashed red, then green. "Brace yourself," she warned. A moment later, Jake felt an almost stomach-dropping lurch as the ship rose vertically, brushing aside branches and foliage with a roar. The screens displayed a swirling panorama of trees and night sky, tinted by the ship's sensors. Within seconds, they soared above the treetops, emerging into the open air. Jake's stomach lurched again as the starship dipped and twisted, rapidly gaining altitude. Then the sensors lit up with alarming signals, multiple aircraft approaching from the east. Zara bit her lip. "They dispatched interceptors," she said. "We must flee." Jake's voice trembled. "You can outrun them, right?" She grimaced. "I can, but they may fire upon us. I cannot engage them in open warfare, or my people's efforts at peaceful diplomacy would be destroyed. I will attempt to evade." The starry sky blurred around them as Zara steered a zigzag course. Outside, Jake saw faint lights, jets, perhaps, converging on their position. The ship's sensors beeped frantically. Then a jolting blast rocked them, sending sparks through the cockpit. One of the jets had launched a missile, which exploded near the starboard side. Zara let out a tense cry, struggling with the controls. The ship shuddered, part of its stealth plating damaged. "I can't remain," she gasped. "I must ascend above your atmosphere." Jake's eyes widened. "If you leave Earth's atmosphere, how do we complete your mission?" She drew a shaky breath. "I cannot let them capture or destroy me. If I ascend, I can cloak again in orbit." Another explosion rumbled, this time jarring them so violently that Jake slammed back in his seat. Sparks flew from a console as a shower of alarms erupted. The starship veered off course. Red lights pulsed throughout the cabin. Zara fumbled at the controls, tears glimmering in her eyes. "We're losing altitude. The thrusters are compromised." Jake's heart pounded. "Do we have a safe landing site?" She shook her head, the console flickering under her desperate fingers. "I'll try to guide us." "Hang on." The next moments blurred into pure chaos. The roaring wind, the swirling darkness, the starship plummeting like a wounded bird. Jake glimpsed the ground rushing up on the display screens, forests and hills looming. The sound of metal shearing filled his ears as the hull scraped against treetops, kicking up sparks. A final jarring crash reverberated through the cabin, and everything went black. Jake did not know how long he was unconscious. It could have been seconds, minutes, or hours. When he came to, he found himself sprawled on the tilted floor of the cockpit, a sharp pain piercing his right shoulder. Smoke hung in the air, stinging his eyes. The red emergency lights flickered. He forced himself up, ignoring the wave of nausea. "Zara," he croaked. A weak moan answered him from the shadows. He crawled toward the pilot's seat, finding Zara slumped over the console, a nasty gash on her temple. Her violet skin glistened with what he assumed was her version of blood, a dark, purplish fluid. Jake's stomach clenched at the sight. He gently pressed a hand to her neck, checking for a pulse. Relief flooded him when he felt a faint, steady rhythm. She stirred, blinking groggily. "Jake," she whispered, voice cracking. Are we still in danger? He looked around, trying to gather his bearings. From the fragment of a screen that still functioned, it appeared they had crash-landed in Denswoods. The ship's hull was cracked open in places, letting in the cold night air. Flames licked at the side panels, where the starboard thrusters had ignited some internal fuel. Jake coughed, trying to stay calm. We need to get out of here before the fire spreads. Can you stand? Zara grimaced, fumbling at her restraints. I think so. With Jake's help, she unbuckled and leaned on him. Together, they made their way down a listing corridor, stepping over scattered debris. The door mechanism had jammed, so Jake used a piece of broken metal to pry it open. A rush of smoky air greeted them, and they tumbled out onto the forest floor. They collapsed among the leaves, panting. Jake glanced back at the starship, which glowed ominously from within, the flicker of flames dancing through ragged tears in the hull. The stench of burnt metal stung his nose. Zara tried to rise, but wobbled, clearly dazed. Jake wrapped an arm around her waist, supporting her. Easy, he murmured. Let's get some distance. They staggered away from the wreck, each step a monumental effort. Branches scratched at them, and the uneven ground threatened to send them tumbling. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they slumped against the trunk of a massive oak. Jake's lungs burned with every breath, but at least they were alive. Zara's eyes fluttered as she fought to stay conscious. We must not let them find me, she murmured. They will come. Jake nodded, swallowing against the dryness in his throat. We should move further away, but you need medical attention. She winced, a trickle of purple blood inching down her temple. I can heal more quickly than you. My kind's biology is resilient, but I require rest and certain minerals. Jake surveyed the darkness. He could see faint flickers of light in the distance, perhaps the approaching search parties or firefighters. Time was short. If we can get to Manny, or a hospital, Zara shook her head. A hospital is too dangerous. They would question my physiology. We cannot risk it. Jake pressed his lips together, mind-whirring. Manny was hours away. They had no vehicle, no communication device that wasn't compromised. And any official roads would likely be swarming with people searching for the crash. A surge of fierce determination rose within him. I'll find a way, he said hoarsely. We'll get out of this. I won't let them take you. Despite her pain, Zara managed a faint smile, golden eyes reflecting gratitude. She rested her head on his shoulder, and for a moment, in the hush of the devastated forest, Jake felt a burning sense of protectiveness that transcended all rational thought. The next hours were a blur of survival. Dawn found them huddled amid thick underbrush, concealed under branches and leaves. Zara's wound had clotted, though she remained weak. Jake ventured back to the wreckage once the flames subsided, hoping to salvage supplies. He found a small medkit with alien symbols on it, along with a portable scanner and a few sealed containers that might be food or water for Zara. Most of the ship was destroyed. Returning to Zara's side, Jake carefully applied a salve from the medkit to her temple. It crackled with an odd, bioelectric tingle. She winced, then relaxed as it numbed her pain. In a few hours, I will regain some strength, she murmured. Then we can try to escape further. Jake nodded, exhaustion tugging at him. He fought to stay alert, scanning the sky. He half expected helicopters or drones. To his relief, the thick canopy shielded them from overhead surveillance, at least temporarily. They spent the morning dozing fitfully, jolting awake at every rustle. By midday, hunger gnawed at Jake. He rummaged through the sealed containers he had salvaged, finding some kind of protein bar that looked suspiciously like compressed algae. He grimaced but tried it, surprised to find it not entirely unpleasant. Zara forced down a bit of it as well, along with sips of water. Around noon, they heard distant voices, men shouting, the crackle of walkie-talkies. Jake's pulse spiked. He eased himself to the edge of the thicket and peered out. Through the thick brush, he glimpsed figures in dark uniforms combing the area near the crash site. They carried rifles, and a few had odd scanning devices. Jake guessed it was the same faction that had attacked them in the bookstore. He ducked back, heart pounding. They're here, searching. Zara managed to stand, wobbling slightly. We must keep moving, she whispered. Go deeper into the forest. Jake agreed. With painstaking care, they threaded their way through tangles of undergrowth, mindful of each snapped twig or rustled leaf that might give away their position. The voices grew fainter, replaced by the steady hum of insects and the occasional squawk of a bird. By mid-afternoon, They found a small stream meandering through moss-covered rocks. Jake helped Zara wash her face, the cool water reviving her. She took a few more bites of the alien protein bar, color returning to her cheeks. "We cannot wander indefinitely," Jake said, scanning the endless expanse of trees. "Eventually, we'll have to find Manny or some other help." Zara nodded, wincing at the memory of the crash. "Without my ship, I am vulnerable," she admitted. "Perhaps we can find a phone, contact Manny, or your friend, the journalist, Rachel." Jake's jaw tightened. "We have to be careful. Any normal phone might be traced. But Manny might have a burner phone at his hideout. If we can just get out of this forest." He trailed off, hearing the faint roar of a helicopter in the distance. Zara's eyes narrowed. They are searching from above. Their situation felt dire. They were two fugitives in a wilderness teeming with heavily armed pursuers. Yet, even in this precarious moment, Jake recalled the old code of heroism that might appear in some classic adventure novel, the unwavering determination that good would prevail over clandestine evil. He felt that stirring, that reckless hope. They pressed on, traveling stealthily until the light began to fade. At dusk, they found themselves at the edge of the forest, near an old logging road that snaked through the trees. Jake reasoned that if they followed the road, they might eventually stumble upon a rural town or outpost. Perhaps they could quietly borrow a vehicle or find a phone. As the sun's last rays vanished behind the hills, Zara paused, clutching Jake's arm. Her gaze swept the sky. "I feel a presence," she murmured, and Jake remembered her subtle, possibly telepathic senses. Seconds later, headlights appeared down the logging road, accompanied by the crunch of gravel. Jake and Zara dove behind a fallen log, hearts hammering. A dark SUV rolled to a stop not far from their hiding spot. Two men climbed out, scanning the forest. Jake clenched his fists. "We can't let them catch us," he whispered. "We're trapped." But then, a curious thing happened. From behind the SUV came a smaller figure, clad in rumpled clothes, a baseball cap pulled low. The figure waved a hand in the men's direction as if dismissing them, then stepped forward. Light from the SUV's headlights revealed a familiar face beneath the cap. Manny. Jake nearly gaped aloud, but Zara squeezed his wrist in caution. The men in black uniforms parted, allowing Manny to move forward. He did not appear to be restrained. With a sinking feeling, Jake wondered if Manny had been coerced or turned. Then Manny spoke, his voice echoing across the clearing. "Jake? Zara? I know you're here. I came on my own. These men are, well, they claim they can help. They say they just want to talk." Jake felt Zara tense. She whispered, "It's a trap." Manny continued, shifting from foot to foot. "Jake, if you're listening, buddy, I've been trying to track you. They found me, said they needed to find Zara, that they have official authority. I don't want you hurt, or her. Just come out, and let's talk. We can sort this out." Jake's instincts roiled. Manny's voice quavered with uncertainty, suggesting he wasn't entirely comfortable with the men he was with. Yet it could be a trick. If Manny was forcibly cooperating, stepping out would be suicide. The men surveyed the darkness, rifles at the ready. Manny called again, his tone desperate. "Jake, I swear, I'm not betraying you. They cornered me. They said they'd kill me if I didn't help. Please, I'm just trying to keep everyone safe." Zara squeezed her eyes shut. He is sincere in his fear. But these men do not intend kindness. Jake inhaled sharply. If they remained hidden, Manny might suffer. If they revealed themselves, they might all be captured or worse. With heart pounding, Jake made a decision. "Wait here," he whispered to Zara. "If anything goes wrong, run." She grabbed his arm, alarmed. "You cannot face them alone." Jake pressed a trembling finger to her lips. "I promise to protect you. I have to try to save Manny too." He stood slowly, stepping out from behind the log with his hands raised. Manny's gaze snapped to him, relief mingled with dread in his eyes. The men in black swung their rifles into position. "Hold!" One barked, motioning for Jake to stop. Jake froze, arms still raised. "I'm here. Don't shoot. Let Manny go." The man sneered beneath his visor. "Where's the alien?" Jake lifted his chin. "She's gone. You guys took out her ship. She's gone back to wherever she came from." Manny swallowed hard, glancing uncertainly at the men. "Jake!" One of the men stepped forward, pulling Manny aside. "If you're lying, Carter, we'll drag you through every interrogation cell in the country until you beg for death." Jake's heart thundered, but he kept his voice steady. I don't know what you're talking about. You chased us. We crashed. I barely survived. She's gone. The second man grunted, glaring into the trees. We'll see about that. He gestured for the first man to search the area. Manny looked at Jake with pleading eyes, silently mouthing, I'm sorry. Jake gave him the barest nod, hoping Manny understood. The searcher vanished into the forest gloom, sweeping the area with a flashlight. Jake silently prayed Zara had found a good hiding spot. The tension in the clearing was thick as the remaining man aimed his rifle squarely at Jake. Manny shifted nervously, mouth dry. Suddenly, a rustling behind them drew all eyes. Zara stepped out, hands raised, the faint glow of her eyes accentuated by the SUV headlights. Jake's stomach dropped. Why had she come out? The men in black tensed, rifles snapping to target. Don't move. Zara's voice was firm, though fear quavered beneath it. I cannot allow any more harm to come to the people who have helped me. She slowly moved closer, ignoring Jake's wide-eyed stare. I surrender. Jake wanted to shout at her to run, but his throat felt constricted. Manny looked on in horror. The lead agent barked, On your knees. Zara complied, kneeling on the damp ground. Her violet skin looked bruised in places, dried blood staining her temple. The men advanced. One seized her arms, yanking them behind her back. She winced. Jake lunged forward, fists raised. Instantly, the agent slammed his rifle but into Jake's stomach, knocking the wind out of him. Jake collapsed, gasping. Manny rushed to Jake's side, glaring at the agents. You said you'd let me go if I helped you, Manny hissed. Don't hurt him. The lead agent gave a cold smile. We'll consider it. Once we secure the alien. He reached into his pocket, withdrawing a syringe of some dark fluid. Kneeling by Zara, he prepared to inject her. Jake's eyes widened, dread flooding him. No, Jake croaked, struggling to get up. The second man pinned him down with a boot. Zara gazed at Jake, tears threatening to spill from her golden eyes. Yet she maintained her composure, raising her chin defiantly. The agent injected her with the fluid, and she slumped forward, unconscious. Jake's world spiraled into a red haze of fury. Summoning strength from desperation, he twisted, kicking the man's leg. The agent stumbled, momentarily losing balance. Manny seized the opportunity, grabbing a nearby branch and smashing it against the man's helmet. Run, Jake! Manny shouted, but Jake refused. His eyes locked on Zara, limp in the arms of the other agent. The lead agent raised his rifle to finish Jake off, but Manny lunged again, grappling with him. The two tumbled to the ground. Jake crawled toward Zara, but the second agent regained his footing, slamming the butt of his rifle into Jake's back. Jake crumpled in agony, a wave of dizziness threatening to black out his vision. He heard Manny cry out as the lead agent landed a punishing blow to Manny's jaw. You're both done, the lead agent hissed. He motioned for the second man to drag Jake upright. Manny lay on the ground, dazed, mouth bleeding. The agent glared at Jake, eyes alight with sadistic triumph. We have the asset, and you've just earned yourself a one-way ticket to a black site. Jake groaned, struggling to speak. You have no idea what you're doing, he rasped. She came in peace. The agent spat. Spare me the alien sympathizer nonsense. They're dangerous. We'll do whatever it takes to defend our planet. He signaled to his partner, who hauled Zara's unconscious form to the SUV. Jake could hardly move, his ribs screaming in pain. Helplessly, he watched them toss Zara's limp body into the back seat. Manny tried to stand, but the lead agent drove a kick into Manny's ribs, knocking him down again. In a haze of helplessness, Jake was forced into the rear of the SUV, Manny shoved in beside him. Then the door slammed shut. Bound with plastic restraints, battered, and reeling with despair, Jake sat in the back of the SUV as it sped along back roads. Manny lay slumped, barely conscious. Zara remained motionless, strapped down beside Jake. He worried about her shallow breathing, the unknown effects of the injection. The agents conferred in the front seats, speaking quietly into coded radios. Jake tried to glean any detail from their muffled conversation. Phrases like secure facility and immediate extraction floated back. As the night wore on, exhaustion wrestled with panic. Jake realized the SUV was heading toward a remote location. No city lights, no towns. Could it be some clandestine base? A terrifying sense of finality settled on him. He wondered if he'd ever see Rosie again, or a free sunrise, or a normal life. Then, unexpectedly, the vehicle slowed, lurching to a stop. The front seat agent cursed. "What the? Roadblock." Jake peered through the tinted windows. Red and blue flashes lit the darkness. Police cars. A roadblock across the two-lane highway. The local authorities, perhaps investigating suspicious activity. Jake's heart pounded with renewed hope. If the agents tried to muscle past, maybe the cops would intervene. The driver killed the headlights, reversing down the shoulder to avoid detection. One agent barked, "We'll take the side route," consulting a GPS device. Suddenly, tires squealed, and bright headlights blinded them from behind. Another pair of vehicles roared up, blocking the retreat. The lead agent snarled, grabbing his rifle. "Ambush. We're compromised." Jake, Manny, and Zara were thrown about in the rear as the SUV spun to face the new threat. Doors flew open, men in black suits leaping out to engage. Gunfire erupted, muzzle flashes streaking the darkness. Jake huddled over Zara, shielding her with his body, the windows cracking around them. "Get down," Manny cried, pressing his face to the seat. The exchange was fierce but brief. A final hail of bullets, then silence. The rear doors of the SUV were wrenched open, and Jake squinted, expecting more black-clad agents. Instead, he was stunned to see government agents wearing official insignias, an alphabet soup agency, but clearly different from the men who had attacked them in the bookstore. A tall woman with stern features and a bulletproof vest leaned in. "You Carter," she demanded. Jake nodded faintly. "And that's the alien?" she continued, gesturing to Zara. He nodded again, heart pounding. She motioned to someone outside. "Get them out now." Within seconds, paramedics, or men who at least appeared to be paramedics, carefully lifted Zara onto a stretcher. Another team cut Jake's and Manny's restraints, helping them from the SUV. Jake's legs wobbled. Manny gripped his shoulder, blinking in disbelief. The tall woman identified herself as an agent from a different, more official intelligence branch. "I'm Director Jennings," she said curtly. "We've been tracking your movements, Carter, ever since you broadcast that footage to Manny's contact. We know about the alien. We also know about the rogue faction that's been trying to capture her. Looks like we got to you just in time." Jake struggled to find words. "Are you the good guys?" Jennings's expression was grim. "We want the same thing your alien friend wants. Diplomacy, not exploitation. Our orders come from the top. We intend to protect her and hear her out. Now let's get all of you to a secure medical facility." For a moment, Jake felt like collapsing with relief. Manny uttered a shaky laugh, tears springing to his eyes. "Thank God," he whispered. Zara was unconscious, but at least now she was in the care of medics who seemed genuinely concerned. Jake clutched her hand as they loaded her into an ambulance, refusing to let go. Jennings allowed him to ride beside her. Manny climbed into another vehicle, escorted by agents who, so far, showed no signs of the cruelty displayed by the rogue operatives. As the convoy sped away, Jake stared at Zara's peaceful face, battered but alive, with an overwhelming sense of gratitude. They had been saved at their darkest hour. He had no guarantee these new authorities were wholly trustworthy, but something in Jennings's demeanor and the official nature of her team gave him hope that maybe, finally, Zara had found the right people to speak to. The days that followed were a whirlwind of medical tests, debriefings, and negotiations behind closed doors. Jake and Manny were kept under watch at a secure government facility, though as guests rather than prisoners, while Zara received the care her alien physiology required. With the help of advanced scanning equipment, doctors identified the harmful chemical in her bloodstream, neutralizing it. Within a day, she was conscious again, regaining her strength. Jake sat by her bed in a small infirmary room, exhaling a trembling breath when she finally opened her eyes. "Jake," she whispered, tears gathering in her golden irises. I feared I would never see you again." He clasped her hand, feeling the warmth in her violet skin. "I'm here. We're safe, thanks to these new government agents who apparently are legit. They want to talk. They actually seem open to it." Zara's eyes brimmed with relief. "Then there is still hope for our two worlds." In the days that followed, Director Jennings facilitated covert meetings with high-level officials who had the security clearance and moral fortitude to handle the truth. Zara explained her mission, her hopes for establishing a peaceful alliance. Although skepticism ran high at first, the undeniable evidence, her own presence, the partial remains of her starship, eroded much of their doubt. Jake found himself sitting in on these meetings, sometimes marveling that he, a simple guy from Glendale Falls who just wanted bananas at a grocery store, was now part of interplanetary diplomacy. Manny joined as well, providing his journalistic perspective, ensuring transparency. The tension between secrecy and revelation weighed heavily on everyone. Eventually, a contingent of trusted officials arranged to meet Zara at a neutral location. She presented them with a partial data module from her ship, demonstrating technological wonders that could help Earth reduce pollution, harness cleaner energy, even manipulate gravitational fields for safer travel. She emphasized that Ceres had no desire to dominate or colonize Earth, that it was an invitation, not an invasion. A hushed excitement spread among the small circle of insiders. They realized this was a momentous opportunity, fraught with risks but also unimaginable potential. Word filtered up the chain of command, reaching a handful of key leaders who gave quiet approval for exploratory talks. Zara's presence was to remain classified for now, but a plan was drafted. Earth would establish a secret liaison office, staffed by open-minded scientists and diplomats, to exchange data with Ceres. Over time, as the world was deemed ready, an official announcement of first contact could be made. Though not as grand or public as Zara had once hoped, it was a start, a stepping stone toward the alliance she envisioned. She accepted it with measured optimism, understanding that Earth's readiness was in question. She told Jake privately that patience was a hallmark of interstellar diplomacy, that even if it took years, the door was now open. Finally, the day came when Zara was set to depart. A specialized unit prepared a small craft that could take her to a low orbit, where a Ceres scout vessel, signaled by covert frequencies, would rendezvous. Earth's officials had agreed to let her leave in peace, albeit discreetly. They recognized that attacking her or holding her captive would only invite retaliation from forces far beyond their comprehension. Jake, Manny, and Director Jennings stood on a tarmac at a secluded airfield at dawn, watching as Zara approached the waiting craft. She wore a new outfit, courtesy of the government, a sleek, silver bodysuit that accentuated her regal bearing. Her violet skin had healed, and her golden eyes shone with renewed vitality. She paused before the open hatch, turning to face Jake. Around them, the hush of dawn cast a serene glow across the runway. Manny had the sense to step back, giving them a private moment. Zara reached for Jake's hand, her expression wistful yet resolute. "I owe you my life," she said softly. "And more than that, I owe you my gratitude for your kindness. You gave me more than a piece of fruit. You gave me courage to believe in Earth's goodness." Jake felt a surge of emotion swirl in his chest. We owe you too. You're giving us a chance to do better, to evolve beyond our divisions. I just wish," he trailed off, swallowing hard. She tilted her head, the corners of her mouth curving into a gentle smile. "What do you wish?" "I wish you didn't have to go," he admitted, voice trembling. "There's a lot we haven't said, or even understood yet, and I don't want this to be goodbye forever." Zara's fingers tightened around his. "It need not be forever, Jake Carter. Our alliance is just beginning. In time, perhaps it will be safe for me, for us, to return. Perhaps you will visit Ceres someday. The cosmos is vast, yet it can also bring hearts together across light years." A tear slipped down Jake's cheek, surprising him with its intensity. He had thought himself too tough, too hardened, for such displays. But here he was, heart cracking open at the prospect of losing this extraordinary being who had come so unexpectedly into his life. He leaned in, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead. She closed her eyes, exhaling a trembling sigh. Then she stepped back, letting her hand slide from his. "I will carry the memory of you with me," she whispered. "Always." With that, she ascended into the craft, the hatch sealing behind her. Director Jennings, observing from a short distance, gave a formal nod. The engines whined softly, and the small vessel lifted into the dawning sky, its outline shimmering with advanced stealth systems. Within moments, it vanished, leaving only a faint swirl of dust on the tarmac. Jake stood there, tears drying on his cheeks, Manny placing a supportive hand on his shoulder. "She'll be back," Manny murmured. "Or we'll go to her, someday. You'll see." Jake nodded, chest tight. gazing at the empty sky. He wanted to believe Manny's words. In the hush of that early morning, amid the swirling emotions, one truth burned brighter than all others. He had done his part to protect Zara Vel, to help Earth stand at the threshold of a new era. And in doing so, he found not only purpose but a sense of belonging he had never known before. Epilogue: a soft landing, a new dawn. Several weeks passed. Manny's story remained under wraps, at least publicly, though he confided to Jake that he was sitting on the scoop of a millennium. Whenever Earth's governments decided to go public, if they ever did, Manny intended to chronicle the tale that began with Jake Carter and a banana in a grocery store. Jake returned to Glendale Falls, finding Rosie still gleaming in his garage. Slipping behind the wheel, he let out a long sigh, recalling the high-speed chases, the fear, and the triumph. Life might resume its routine, but he knew he was forever changed. He now carried the knowledge that humans were not alone, that a cosmic tapestry existed just beyond Earth's horizon. One afternoon, while idly polishing Rosie's hood, Jake felt a buzzing from his phone. It was a message from a private, unknown number. Only a single sentence. "Our path will cross the stars again. Z." Jake stared, heart thudding. A grin spread across his face, and he gently placed the phone on the passenger seat. He ran a hand along the Camaro's steering wheel, reflecting on the improbable series of events that had brought an alien diplomat into his life. He turned the key in the ignition, listening to Rosie's engine purr. Driving down Main Street, he felt the sun warm on his arm through the open window. Locals waved, some giving the Camaro an appreciative nod. They had no idea their quiet neighbor had once helped save an alien from certain capture, or that somewhere in the cosmos, a new alliance between Earth and Ceres was forming. Jake Carter might never be famous, not in the conventional sense, but he carried an unspoken legacy in his heart. And in that unremarkable small town, with the rumble of his beloved '69 Camaro beneath him, he sensed something extraordinary growing in the quiet corners of his soul: hope, and the promise of what lay beyond the stars. Though an interstellar gulf now separated him from Zara Vel, their bond, forged over a single, humble banana, remained unbreakable. And for Jake, that was enough. He smiled to himself, shifting gears as the Camaro roared forward, knowing that one day, somehow, he and Zara would cross paths again in a universe vast and full of possibility. In that unspoken dream, the ending was undeniably, wonderfully happy.